If you've ever been told you're too quiet, be more confident, or try to be more social, I want you to pause for exactly 10 seconds before blaming yourself. Because the problem may never have been who you are, but the world that misdefined your value from the very beginning. We live in a culture that confuses noise with strength, where fast responses are mistaken for intelligence, loud voices are mistaken for confidence, and constant visibility is mistaken for worth. In that world, silence isn't listened to. It's questioned, treated as a flaw that needs fixing. From a very early age, you absorb a subtle but relentless message. If you don't raise your hand the fastest, speak comfortably in crowds, or blend into the noise, then something must be wrong with you. And over time, you begin to believe you need to become someone else to be accepted. But here's the uncomfortable truth few people say out loud. This society is not neutral. It is built around extroverts, around nervous systems that require constant stimulation to feel alive. In a system like that, introverts don't struggle because they're inadequate. They burn out because they're forced to operate against their biological design every single day. Your quiet was never a weakness. It was simply never rewarded in a world that confuses volume with value. And once you see that clearly, the question stops being, why am I not like them? And becomes, why was I taught that I needed to be? If you look honestly at your entire journey, from your earliest days in the classroom to the moment you entered the working world, you'll see that the feeling of not being enough was never random. It was systematically shaped. In school, spaces that were supposed to support different ways of thinking, you quickly learned that value wasn't measured only by how deeply you understood something, but by how quickly and visibly you expressed it. The students who raised their hands first, spoke the loudest, and answered the fastest were praised as confident and intelligent, while those who needed time to process, who preferred observation over debate, were quietly labeled shy, passive, or lacking initiative. No one said it directly, but grading systems, reward structures, and attention did the talking. As you grew older and entered the workplace, that pattern didn't disappear. It was simply dressed in more professional language. Open offices were celebrated as symbols of creativity, but functioned as environments of constant stimulation. Meetings followed meetings, where the person who talked the most was often assumed to contribute the most. Loud brainstorming sessions favored quick reactions over deep thought, and crowded networking events turned self-promotion into a requirement for survival. Job descriptions repeatedly demanded high energy, enthusiasm, and excellent communication skills, as if those traits alone defined competence. In a system that reflects value primarily back to extroverts, introverts slowly turn the judgment inward. You begin to wonder why you feel drained after seemingly harmless meetings, why you need solitude after work while others keep going, and why speaking in front of groups exhausts you so deeply. You don't realize that you're trying to operate a finely tuned nervous system inside an environment designed for non-stop stimulation. And instead of questioning the structure of the system, you learn to adjust yourself to fit it. Each time you force yourself to speak before you're ready or blend in when your energy is already depleted, you reinforce the false belief that something is wrong with you, when the colder truth is this. When a system is built to reward only one type of person, those who don't fit it aren't inadequate, they're simply misplaced. At this point, you might still think this is just about personality, habits, or effort, but the truth runs much deeper. It begins in the way your nervous system is wired. The human brain was never meant to operate on a single template, and introverts aren't simply people who like quiet. They are biologically configured differently. Think of the brain as an energy system. For extroverts, energy is recharged from the outside. The more interaction, noise, and movement they experience, the more alive they feel. For introverts, energy is stored internally, and every meeting, conversation, or crowded space becomes a discharge. The issue isn't that you're not trying hard enough, it's that you're being kept in a state of prolonged stimulation that your nervous system was never built to tolerate long term. Neuroscience links this difference to how the brain processes dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and excitement. Extroverts typically require stronger stimulation to feel satisfied, while introverts have a much higher sensitivity, meaning even moderate stimulation can overwhelm their system. When introverts are placed in loud, high stimulation environments for extended periods, the brain doesn't adapt by becoming stronger. It becomes fatigued, leading to anxiety, tension, and the freeze response you may have felt but never had words for. In that state, your body isn't craving more dopamine, it's craving acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter tied to calm, deep focus, and mental clarity, the state you naturally access when you're alone, reading, writing, or thinking in silence. So, your exhaustion isn't a weakness, it's an accurate biological signal that you're trying to run a finely tuned nervous system on the wrong kind of fuel, and no amount of push harder or be more confident advice can override that reality. But if this were only about biology, it wouldn't hurt this much, because what slowly wears you down isn't just nervous system overload, it's a psychological wound formed by the fear of being excluded. From an early age, you learn that to be accepted, to avoid being seen as different, you need to perform a more agreeable version of yourself, more talkative, more open, less quiet. And that's when the first mask goes on. In analytical psychology, Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the social face we present to meet the world's expectations, while the traits that are criticized or misunderstood, like silence, the need for solitude, or sensitivity, are pushed into the dark and become the shadow, the parts of ourselves we're taught to reject. For introverts, this process happens quietly but relentlessly. Every time you ask why you're so quiet, why you seem distant, why you don't join in more, the same conclusion forms inside the child within you. Who I truly am isn't enough. Over time, you stop wearing the mask only when necessary. You begin to live in it, smiling when your energy is gone, participating when you want to withdraw, speaking when your mind feels empty. Or, to avoid the pain of being left out, the cost of this adaptation is never paid upfront, it's paid slowly through chronic exhaustion, social anxiety, emotional numbness, and an ongoing internal war between your authentic self that longs for quiet and a social self terrified of judgment. You think you're tired because life is hard, but underneath it all, you're tired because you've been performing for too long, because you traded your true needs for conditional acceptance. And no one ever taught you that love or approval built on self-abandonment eventually turns its back on you. At this point, the question is no longer whether you can fix yourself to fit in, but whether a world led only by loud voices could survive at all. A society obsessed with speed eventually makes careless decisions. An organization that rewards only those who talk the most misses its deepest insights. And a system addicted to constant stimulation ultimately burns itself out. Introverts were never meant to win that noisy race, they exist to balance it. If extroverts are fire, bringing motion, momentum and ignition, introverts are water, quietly cooling systems down, penetrating beneath the surface and preventing everything from overheating. You are the one who notices patterns others overlook, who listens while everyone else is trying to speak, who pauses to question when the crowd rushes toward answers. History has never been shaped solely by the loudest voices, but by minds patient enough to think clearly when chaos sets in. In a world saturated with noise, your quiet presence is not empty space, it's an invisible structure that keeps everything standing. Not all power needs to be displayed. Some forms of power exist precisely to prevent the world from collapsing under its own urgency. So if you were never meant to chase noise, the real question isn't how to become a second-rate extrovert, but how to live fully as a first-rate introvert in the modern world. This doesn't require you to escape society or change who you are. It requires you to redesign your life around your actual biology and energy rhythms. Start by treating your energy as a finite asset. Because every social interaction, every invitation, every loud environment is a withdrawal. And if you spend it just to please others, you'll live in a constant state of depletion. Saying no isn't selfish, it's an act of self-respect. Create intentional transition spaces in your day, quiet buffers between work and personal life that allow your nervous system to cool down before shifting roles, because for introverts, a few minutes of silence isn't a luxury, it's a requirement for health. Instead of forcing yourself to be everywhere, invest in depth, in one-on-one conversations, in relationships where listening and understanding matter more than performance, because the ability to build deep trust is your natural advantage in a surface-driven world. And finally, return to your inner world without guilt, through writing, reflection, or simply being alone in silence, not to escape life, but to organize your thoughts, emotions, and energy. When you stop apologizing for your quiet, when you stop trying to become someone else to be accepted, you realize you don't need to be loud to matter or constantly visible to be valued, because your presence, even in silence, carries real weight. Let the world move fast if it wants to, but you are allowed to move at your own pace, because those who know when to slow down, observe, and listen are often the ones who keep life from drifting off course.